Welcome to the Outdoor Industry Executive Voices podcast. I'm Tony O'Neill, and I am very excited to be joined by my special guest, Keith Denny, a trailblazer in the outdoor and athletic footwear industry. Keith has led iconic brands like Ekin, Converse, Timberland, and Nike to new heights. At Ekin, he took the outdoor performance and kids divisions to a staggering 33% unit increase and added nearly $250 million in global sales in just a couple of years. But Keith is more than just numbers. He's a people developer known for building high-performing teams. His consumer insights mastery has led to innovative products that resonate globally. With a career spanning decades, Keith has been a growth catalyst for multiple businesses, emphasizing integrity and excellence. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate the introduction. Super excited to be here. And thanks for having me as your guest.
I am so glad you're here with me today, Keith. So we're going to jump right in. And I think something that everyone would be very interested to know is, what was the pivotal moment in your life that led you to become part of the outdoor and athletic footwear industry?
Okay, so I'm going to take you back a little ways, and I don't want to age myself here either, but let's just say that back when I was in high school and college, I was an athlete, and I remember I was at a high school basketball practice, and this gentleman shows up with a bag of shoes, and he walks over onto the sidelines and unzips the bag and starts pulling out all of this product that I'd never seen before. They were Nike basketball shoes, and I'd known him from my past. He was also I went to McMinnville High School. He was a former athlete at McMinnville High School as well. And so I went over to talk to him, and he explained to me why he was there. He was looking for people to wear test shoes. He only had a couple different sizes, and it just so happened that I was one of the sizes that he was looking to fit test. And so that then turned into a long-term wear testing program that I was able to participate in with Nike from high school all the way through college. But I think the most important thing for me in that introduction, and you're an impressionable person at that age. You're still trying to figure out what you want to do. I was still trying to figure out where I wanted to go to college. And but I knew immediately after that exchange that was a cool job. I wanted to do something like that. And I did because I love sports. I love the idea of what Nike represented at the time, and it was still a very young company, still trying to find its way. But I just loved the idea of being a part of something like that. So if you fast forward and I'm concluding my college education, there was really only one brand that I wanted to work with. And some of that too is the fact that when you grow up in Oregon and you go to the University of Oregon, that is a history lesson in Nike in itself. I mean, the entire campus is surrounded by Nike and the stories of Nike. And so I took a big risk, and I decided I'm only going to apply for one company. I'm going to sent 4 resumes in with cover letters to 4 different executives at Nike, just hoping that one of them would stick. Now, Tony, keep in mind, there is no cell phones, no social media. There's no LinkedIn, none of that. You are cold calling basically, and you're just sending your resume to what you think is the corporate office address, and you just hope that those letters find their way to the right people. And then if they do, I already knew that they were not the ones that were going to be hiring me or have that much influence. You just hope that maybe they made their way down to the people that did. And ultimately, a couple weeks later, after I was sitting there, that takes time, right? It's the U.S. mail. So it takes time to hear back. A couple weeks later, I get a call, and they wanted me to come up to Beaverton and interview for a position. It was a new program that they had just started. It was a management training program in retail. And I'd had some retail experience. I actually really enjoyed retail. And then as I got up there and learned more about the program that they were offering and what the opportunity was, I became more and more excited. And, the feeling was, you can ask me all the questions you want. I am in. This is really what I want to do. I want to be a part of your organization, and it feels like this is a good way to get started. And I think one of the first things that you learn through that experience, especially as you get hired. You're coming out of college and you think, really, you want to work in retail? But for me, it was the best way to come in and learn about the company, learn about the product, learn about the consumers, because you're face to face with them every single day. And when you're in retail, you're working 10-hour days on the floor, 6 or 7 days a week. You're just doing it. And that just fueled me. I loved it. I loved being able to talk to consumers, understand what their needs and wants were, and finding solutions for them. And so that was really the start for me. And a lot of that too came from my enthusiasm around just being a part of that brand. It was easy for me to go out and be enthusiastic about the brand and about the products. And so, when the truck showed up at the back door and we were getting new product in, that was like Christmas. And so everyone lighting up. And the other thing too at the time is in retail, it's challenging. We all know about turnover rates and things like that at retail. You're hiring, when you open up stores like this, 30 to 50 people at a time. And you're trying to find the right fit. You're trying to find people that understand the culture and appreciate that and want to embrace it. And that's not always easy to do. And you make mistakes, but you also find people that just have the same appreciation as what I felt I had. And there are people that I hired back then that are still with the organization today. And so, that was really my first introduction to understanding the importance of hiring the right people to fit the brand, to fit the culture. And that had an impression on me. Then from there, the next natural progression, I guess, for me is moving into what we call the Ekin department. And for those of you that don't know the Ekin department, they have kind of a following out there. And there's been so many people that have come through the organization and have been Ekins. But the Ekins are the tech reps, and Ekin is Nike spelled backwards because you were asked to know the company frontwards and backwards. But it was also, when the Ekins were put in place, it was a time when we needed to look backwards at what the company represented, what the culture really represented, and make sure that we were out there talking to people and reinforcing that. And so for me, it was exciting because now again, I took what I learned in retail and now I'm applying that in this new role of going out and educating retailers, consumers. You're showing up at events and talking to athletes and really reinforcing, what the Nike brand is all about and how our products are going to perform. And so, that to me then was part of the next evolution in my career at Nike. And that was to take me into product management and product marketing. And that's really where I spent a bulk of my time at Nike was in that field. And, from that moment on in my career, that is really where I've had my focus. So I find that, that kind of part of my career, I was lucky, right? I was able to kind of, work for the company that I really wanted to work for. I was allowed the opportunity to be in areas and functions that really allowed me to understand the importance of being a part of a brand like that. And then by the time I got into product, to me, writing a brief and understanding the consumer was second nature for me. And so it really helped to establish myself in that area. And it really tapped into the things that I loved about what my prior part of my Nike career was all about. And so for me, that's really what is the springboard into going into the next evolution of my career.
I'm going to recap just a little bit because there's some pretty awesome stuff in this. So Keith, you're an athlete in Oregon, high school, started being a fit tester for Nike shoes. What category shoes were you fit testing for?
It was basketball product. And So, and again, it was product that was new to the market. I hadn't seen it before, hadn't experienced it before. That's what made it cool is that, wow, I'm wearing product that no one else can wear at this point.
This was the category that Nike really wanted to get into, but it was so difficult because Adidas and Converse had the market share and Nike was considered a running shoe, I think, at that point. Yeah. You said, and I love this, that you wrote a cover letter and a resume to 4 different executives back then because we didn't have the internet. Did you look them up in a phone book? How did you even know who to write at Nike? Or were these guys almost bigger than life that people actually knew who they were at that point?
No, I had to be really careful. So I went to the library and at the library, they had every company listed, you go, first you pull out the book of Oregon companies.
Okay.
You flip to the pages and you find Nike, and then it will list out the executives. Now, the one executive that I knew probably I wasn't going to waste my time with was Phil Knight. So I looked at everyone else across the organization, CFOs, COOs, just anyone in the C-suite that seemed to like maybe have some influence. And that's really where I focused my direction there.
So you mailed these letters out, and who called you back? Was it one of the executives? Was it HR? Was it an executive assistant? Who set the interview up in regards to the messages that you sent?
Yeah, good question. So my resume somehow made its way from one of those 4 executives down to HR. And at the time when they were starting this management training program, and I'm sure whatever executive it was that forwarded it down, looked at my experience, and it's limited, right? You're coming out of college, your experience is limited, but I did everything I could in high school and college to build some experience that I could say, all right, I actually have some things I can put on my resume. At the time, there was a lot of retail experience on there. And so you take my love of athletics, my participation in sports, and then this retail experience, that probably is what led my resume making its way down to HR when they were looking at fulfilling this new role. And it was new. I was the very first person to walk in and take on this new division and this new training program. And so it was really exciting for me. And after the interview, I was just like, where do I sign up? This is perfect. I don't care. I can mop the floors. I could I could just be in the back room stocking shoes, whatever you want me to do. I know I'm going to get value out of it and it will help. So
you made it happen. I love that. So this is my last going back question, because it was literally 2 weeks ago that I watched the movie Air. So I'm just totally amazed at how Sonny Vaccaro signed Michael Jordan. Was Sonny still there, or had he left?
Sonny was still very much a figure there. And so this was years later. So that period of the time when Air was being focused on, I came in a few years later. A few years later, right? So it was at a time when they had started, the basketball business had been established. Visible Air started to make its appearance, first in running shoes, and then the Air Revolution basketball shoe was the first to come out with Visible Air. You also started to see this new category being developed in cross training. And so you started to see the business evolve and begin to be more diversified from what its roots were, which was really in running. Getting Michael Jordan signed, and, keep in mind that year they also signed Charles Barkley, and they started to get this group of athletes, very influential and visible athletes in the NBA, that was starting to bring more attention to the brand. What that offered the brand, though, was the opportunity to start exploring different things and continue to innovate. And so that was a critical part of the growth. That was when I started to come in as an Ekin, which was really exciting because that's when you really get to go out and start to inform and educate people on new innovation, on new product categories, which no one really understood, and really start to create a business about it. And I look back and I think the Ekins at that time were very influential in establishing those new innovations and those new categories, because when you're talking to retailers, those are the questions they have. They have concerns about what is this product that we have on the wall. Now, of course, Bo Jackson was your spokesperson for it. That helps. But it still doesn't really inform people as to what are the multiple activities that you can do here. And so those are the kind of things that when I came into the Ekin department, that's what was really on the forefront. And that was what was exciting to be a part of.
In the Ekin department, were you collecting any information, or was it purely going out and educating the franchisees, the independent specialty retailers, or were you gathering insight also and then reporting back into the Nike mothership?
That's a really good point, because I might have failed to say that. Though one of the biggest advantages to having people out in the field talking with consumers and retailers and other athletes is now you've got a conduit of information back into the product teams. And so we would come back quarterly and report out what we were learning, what consumers were saying, where the challenges were, what they liked about the product and what they didn't like about the product. And so the Ekins were a strong voice back into product marketing. That's also, a way for us at the time to really get that connection into product marketing. And they, on the other hand, saw the value that we were providing. they saw the talent that was out there and recognized that these are the type of people that we want leading product organizations. And honestly, that was a big part of setting up the Ekin department as well, is like, hey, this is the feeder group. This is the group that we're setting up to be the future of our product marketing teams. And I look back at how many of the people that started in Ekins and made their way through product marketing. It's staggering the number of really influential Nike product people that came through the organization with a start in the Ekin department.
That's amazing to have that as a start. You have led multiple iconic brands, including Keen, Converse, Timberland. They're not the same cultures. They're not the same products. Yes, they're footwear, but there's differences in how they operate, how they're led. You've been in a leadership role for a long time. What are some of your core principles that guide your leadership style across such diverse companies?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me is really understanding is the organization itself. Is it made up of people that really live and breathe the culture? And are they bringing people into the organization that support that as well? And you can get a sense of that pretty much immediately. And when I went out to talk to Timberland, Timberland it was a different brand, but it also reflected a little bit more about my values and my beliefs and my interests at the time. And so that's what pulled me in the first place. What you hope when you walk in that building and you start talking to people is that you get that sense of that same level of belief and values and culture that you hope. And that was the immediate sense I had. You walk in, at that time, this is before Timberland was sold to VF, and it's not to say it's that much different today than it was then, but it had a family feel to it. It was a company that really was purpose driven. They believed in supporting the communities. They believed in giving back. And that was important to me at the time. That was something that I was developing as part of my own personal beliefs. And so being a part of something like that was important to me. And again, it was looking less about the opportunity at the organization and more about asking myself, is this an organization that I want to be a part of because of what it represents? And everybody I talked to, whether it was going to be a part of a teammate that was going to be part of the team that I was leading, or all the way up to the CEO, the thing that struck me is the message was consistent and clear with everyone. And you can't just fake that. You just sense that it's something that is real. And so for me, that was really important. And I walked away from that visit saying, this is it. Now, it's a big risk, right? So I'm leaving the comfort and the progression of the career that I had established at Nike and taking this risk of leaving, that industry and moving into a different industry within the footwear realm, and moving a young family across the country. And so it's a big risk, but it's one that when I look back, it was the right thing to do. That's how, maybe that was the first big risk. I mean, there were risks that I took at Nike too, but this was a big risk. And I think that was a takeaway for me, is that I needed to make sure that I appreciated and accepted that risk was okay. It's worth taking. It may not always work out. You'll learn and move on. But in certain situations, you just know that there's maybe less risk involved in making those type of moves. And in this case, I really felt that way.
I'm curious, what was the component that really helped you decide that taking this risk and moving a young family from one side of the country to the other side is such a serious thing? What was the one piece that made it feel so right that you took the risk?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, Nike had a really strong embedded culture, and they had values and they had ethics and they had, the things that people lived and breathed. They called them maxims. And it was something that was, at every desk that you sat at, you looked at what those maxims were. And that was important to the company. When I went to Timberland, it was a different set of maxims, right? It was about, of course, when you move into the outdoor industry, it's going to feel a little different. The culture might feel a little different. The one thing I appreciated though, is that, Nike is an athlete driven type of company. it can be very competitive. It's like that environment of bringing athletes that are all kind of sometimes at a very elite level. That is really what it's built around. What I saw, and there's nothing wrong with that either. I enjoyed that competitiveness. That's what drives you coming into work every single day. What I learned at Timberland is that there was a spread of what I would call enthusiasts within the industry, right? You had those that love being in the outdoors, but maybe not necessarily at this extreme level. And then you also had those that really were the athletes and the outdoor enthusiasts. And so having that kind of breadth of individuals that kind of helped make up the culture of what that company represented, to me was really intriguing. The people I met, every individual that I talked to just gave me a sense of confidence that this is a company that lives and breathes it. And even though I felt that at Nike, if I was going to move and do something different, and quite honestly, from a personal standpoint, the timing was right for us to make a move as well. And so if we were ever going to do it, our kids were at the age where the risk was a little less. They hadn't started school yet. So if we're going to do this, let's do it now. If we wait 5 years, it's going to be harder. So a lot of that played into it as well. But yeah, I believed in everything that the brand stood for. And what I really believed in was the opportunity to come in, lead a team, lead these cross-functional teams, and see an opportunity for really exciting growth. And not only just from a business standpoint, but also from a cultural and people standpoint. Mm-hmm. It was just there. And so that to me was really exciting.
I love this. To me, I hear that you saw a different culture, a different, like you said, set of maxims that resonated even more with your core, at least felt like they were at the point, right? Then you get there and you realize, wow, this actually, not only did it feel right, it is right. And now Timberland, all these brands for that matter, they're all global. And I'm really, really curious. You've probably overcome challenges at each of these brands, but I'm super curious with your consumer insights background in scaling a brand globally. What are some of the challenges, or what's the key challenge? And maybe Timberland's a great example, right? What was the key challenge of getting that brand outside of just the United States and then making it known and respected and people to have the intrigue to buy and wear them?
Yeah, it's a really good question because, at that time, Timberland was a global brand, but how it was viewed in the different parts of the world was very different. So in the US, I was running the boot business and 70% of our business was done here in the US. It was such a small part of the business outside of the US. And so when we went to Europe, for instance, for sales meetings, where in the US, if we did a sales meeting, it was a dog and pony show for celebrating our boots and our boot business and the future and the new stories that we were going to tell. When you went to Europe, it wasn't necessarily that same sort of vibe, but what you recognized is the opportunity. So where we had a big lifestyle and kids business over in Europe, for instance, the potential of what our brand could represent outside of that was really the growth opportunity that we had. If we could figure out how to flip the switch and turn that boot business on outside of the US, that's where significant growth can come from. So you can gather all the consumer insights. You can spend a lot of time in the marketplace and talk to retailers, talk to consumers, and get a really deep understanding for what the potential and opportunity is. I've always, though, been a big believer in looking at who you have internally and using them as partners to understanding what that potential truly is. And for me, there's two areas of the business that I think are really important. The first is sales. And sales is a partner of yours that really understands, what's going on in the marketplace, what their retailers are telling them, what the challenges are. And, a buyer can be very transparent. Now, you also have to balance oftentimes, what you're hearing is what's happening today versus 18 months from now. But all of that is really valuable in understanding the insights that's going to drive your business for the next couple years. The second function for me was merchandising. And merchandising in organizations where I've been, product management, merchandising, and sales are their own functions. Merchandising kind of sits in between product and sales, a really integral kind of funnel that goes back and forth between the two functions. And it's their job to really understand the marketplace, understand, where we want to go and how we go to market, how product is tiered, how it's priced, distribution strategies. All of that is really critical to the success of that. And if you're trying to grow a business outside the US and other regions, you absolutely have to have that dialed in. Now, if I'm leading a product engine, then my job is to make sure that I'm tapping into that expertise and that they're partners. They're coming to the table and we're all talking about that together. And not everything is going to stick, right? Not everything, every opportunity is right for us as a brand. Maybe there's another brand out there doing something that's interesting and maybe is kind of the hot thing in the marketplace at that time. But you have to take a step back and ask yourself, is it right for our brand? Because oftentimes you can make those decisions on product and end up paying for it down the road. And it can be more brand damaging than brand good. And so you've got to be able to come to the table and have a really good dialogue, open dialogue, and understand everyone's point of views. And I think that's something that we always did when we kicked off a season is let's bring those people together. And especially critical when it comes to those regions where your business is more in the infancy stages, and you have the potential for growth. No better way to uncover what those opportunities are than to bring the right people to the table.
I could not agree more with that. You have a reputation for your people development skills in our industry. What is your approach to fostering a culture of innovation and excellence within a team? And is that different when your team is, whether it's in Asia or South America?
Yeah. So one of the fact that you just mentioned that just I think kind of maybe that's a good place to start is because when I was at Converse, I ran what we called our regional product creation teams. We had teams in Brazil and Shanghai and Boston and Italy. And you have individuals within those product teams that are diverse as you could possibly be. And they have such a great understanding of their culture and their consumer and what's important and things that you can and can't do within those specific regions. And so being able to tap into that is super important. As far as then kind of developing those teams, and I think this is answering your question, Tony, but as far as being able then to maximize the potential that they can bring, it's like, how do you foster that? How do you make sure that the teams you have in place, the values and the culture that you've established, how do you then put people in a place to kind of boldly take your brand into the future? And the best way to do that is to tap into all the things that I just described in those regional teams, but also, across the organization. What can we do to make sure that we're bringing thoughts, thinking, diverse thinking into how we create the future? And I think we may have mentioned this earlier, but, when it comes to diversity and equity and inclusion, extremely important as far as how you build out your teams and how you get people to think differently. In our industry in particular, having different people that represent your customers and your brand and your communities is really important. You have to have diverse teams that represent all aspects of your customer base. That doesn't mean that everyone has to be an athlete or this extreme outdoor enthusiast. You need all levels of it, and you will learn from each other through that dynamic. Those that are maybe part of the team that feel like the outdoors is a really good way for you to express yourself and your mental health and your physical health, but you're not doing it at an extreme level, can learn from those that do. Those extreme athletes and outdoor enthusiasts can also learn from those that are new entrants into the industry and into the outdoors. We all can learn from each other. That's how you build a balanced product portfolio to begin with, is everyone has to have a voice. And so building kind of that culture, those teams that represent that, I think is really important.
Which of the cultures that you've worked with did you find was the most uniquely different to culture of the U.S.?
It's a good question. there's so much you could say about each of them. I would say for me, it was probably our team in Brazil, and they're in Sao Paulo. And the reason I say that is, for one, the team that we had set up there also had local manufacturing. So there was this element that was provided there that provided a unique discipline for them. The second is there was, at the time, a lot of political and cultural upheaval that they were dealing with and their retailers were dealing with. And so being sensitive to that and understanding how that affects the business, how it affects what we want to bring to market, the messaging that we have, and then what we as an organization should represent in those types of communities. And so I think that to me is probably the most glaring example, but each team, I think, brought unique challenges. Our team in China had to deal with import issues. Our team in Italy was much more of a fashion style driven business. And so you had to balance all of that. But I loved working with all those teams. That team down in Brazil, I learned so much from, and how to appreciate culture and appreciate how diversity is really important to understanding how you work with people and how you recognize consumers and how you really go to business.
That's fascinating. And to be honest, it's not the first time I've heard someone say that the culture working with your brand in Brazil is a pretty unique experience. And I mean, let's be honest, the beauty of that is the more unique experiences that we collect in our lives, really the more full life I believe that we live.
Yeah.
You've got the need for product innovation and brand integrity, right? There's kind of a third piece in the culture. We just talked through that with the different regions globally. But my question, and what I'm curious is, with the need for product and innovation and brand integrity, how do you balance that with P&L globally?
Yeah. So goes hand in hand, right? So the reason why you invest in innovation is because innovation is what leads to your future. And if you aren't constantly innovating, if you aren't constantly solving for unmet consumer needs, then you're going to be stagnant and you're going to get past. And so it's imperative that you have an innovation team that is constantly challenging the rest of the organization with what could be. What could be is what can lead to business success and growth. To me, it goes hand in hand. If you can't invest or won't invest in an innovation infrastructure, you're bound to be passed by those that are willing to do that. And, we've seen that here. All the brands that I've worked with, when new innovation comes to market, you rally around that. Not everything works, but those that do can help create the future of your organization and drive new revenue channels that you didn't know existed. And so once you have those revenue streams identified and moving, and now you're starting to layer on the next new innovation or the next new idea, that's when things start to really build. So for me, the investment made in innovation is just the price of entry to make sure that you are growing your business. It's one of the most important aspects, and one of the most important investments you can make in a business is making sure that you've got an innovation team that is constantly generating ideas and looking at ways to solve problems in new ways.
Keith, what role do the consumer insights in this competitive analysis play in your decision-making process with these brands, or any brand for that matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. So, I've seen, in my years, I have seen good briefs and I've seen not so good briefs. The not so good briefs are the ones that are not grounded in consumer insights and an understanding of what a consumer is really looking for. What's a designer going to do with that, right? They need tangible, consumer-driven insights that they need to deliver upon. Those briefs that do have it start a dialogue. It starts a conversation around who this consumer is. It starts the research into better understanding what it is that they're doing. So for me, it's like that's that's a non-starter. Every brief needs to start with an understanding of who the consumer is that you're targeting, the insights that you're seeing, the demographics that are driving those insights, and then where you see this consumer evolving to. Because again, keep in mind, we're normally on a 12 to 18 month product creation cycle. You've got to stay ahead of things and understand where this consumer is going. And so as designers that have worked on our teams, we like to also involve them in that process and make sure that they've got input into the briefs. They've got input into what they're seeing from a consumer standpoint. It really is owned by product management, but still you've got to be able to bring everyone's insights to the table. And again, it goes back to that, who else do we want to bring to the table to start these conversations? We had, at Keen, we had a really strong consumer insights individual. She was constantly tapped into what was going on. Those insights were so valuable to better understanding what the true opportunity is. And I'll share an example with you. We were deep into kind of the pandemic and finding that, we see all these new entrants that are going out into the outdoors. One of the fastest growing categories at the time was walking. And so, we had our insights team deliver us unbelievable insights into what was driving participation rates up, who they were, some surprising results that came out of that. Like a lot of the participation rates were coming from younger consumers. And so just understanding that and the potential that it has, and then what they're looking for in a category, quite frankly, that we had no history in. But we took a step back and asked ourselves, does this make sense? Is it right for us? What's the potential? And do we have a consumer base right now that would accept that from us as a brand? And is there also a potential to bring new consumers into our brand because now we're offering something different to them?
Yeah. So this person that you are working with at Keen, where was the origin of their consumer insights? Where do they originate from that they're going to use to then deliver to the innovation team with the consumers and the insights and the data and the strategy that could be good for the market?
Yeah, she was tapping into NPD data, Harris Polls, WGSN. There were a lot of places that she was able to pull in. But what we learned in a really good exercise that she would lead us through is we would bring in consumers and put them into a situation where we split up into teams and started to dive deeper into each of these consumers' wants and needs and what their activities are, and then come together after all of that is done and share our findings. She was responsible for really, facilitating that exercise. The learnings that you get out of that and how you start to bucket the similarities of the things that you're hearing across very different consumers is pretty remarkable. And so you can read all the data. It's all important. But sitting down and talking to consumers, getting out to where they're participating in the outdoors is super critical. And it was something that, for a period of time there, we were missing, obviously. But as soon as we had the ability to get back out and be in the outdoors with people and see what they're doing and what their challenges are and talking to them about their experiences in the outdoors, you just can't beat it. And so that's something that she brought to the organization. And I can't imagine now being part of any organization that doesn't have a role similar to hers.
I'm sure you've seen, and I've seen many times in the outdoor industry, is companies that come up with really amazing products, right? These companies are founded by really inventors and super amazing product lover and engineers. And it's that point when they start, they have the product, they have their start, they have a business going. And from there, once they tap into consumer insights, it's whatever plateau, wherever they think they've been and where they think they can go, there's a good chance that they can become a rocket ship. And so I'm a super huge fan, and I've been fortunate enough to see this firsthand, that once they started implementing the insights to create a real innovation pipeline.
I think the importance that we put on the organizations that I've been a part of, I've always felt like it's important. Any seasonal kickoff starts with, all right, what's the next new innovation that is ready to be commercialized that we want to start to bring into our line? Start there first. And then figure out, all right, how and when is the right time to start to introduce those? And are they meeting the consumer needs that we've identified, as opposed to waiting. Because if you wait, then you're plugging it in and it's not necessarily going to resonate with the product that you briefed. You've got to start with that at the beginning and understand what those opportunities are. So we used to host, innovation shows where the teams, and they were always so proud of this, they'd be able to showcase all the things they're working on. And you'd walk through it like it's a museum and see all the different things they're working on. And then identifying, right, this is commercially ready because we've got a home for this right now that would serve a need that we're trying to address. And that's really where innovation and product teams are working at their best.
I absolutely love it. So tell me this, Keith, how do you see the future of sustainability in the outdoor and athletic footwear industry?
All right. So it's a good question. And I know this is kind of it's the hot topic within our industry. And I think we've gotten to a point where, we need to move beyond just the word itself and really understand the significance that it means and can bring to an organization. And I think for any organization that wants to stand for sustainability, it starts with actions. It starts with, doing the things that you need to do to be more sustainable, to be more aware and understanding of what your product is doing to the environment and to the planet, and do something about it. It also requires showing progress, and you have to be honest. I mean, you have to be transparent in the progress or maybe a lack of progress that you're making in your sustainability efforts. And so, I think we can all admit that we're not all perfect. That there are brands out there certainly doing better than others, and they live and breathe it. It's that point at which when a company, and again, I look at this as part of the culture of a company, right? Is that when you have individuals in the organization that live it, that breathe it, that are motivated by it, that are finding constantly solutions to make your product more sustainable and better for the planet. They're asking questions, they're probing, they're challenging. Like, how can we do things better? We still use a lot of glues in this industry, right? You think about it. It's like, how do you start to use less? How do you move into water-based solvents so that you're eliminating that aspect of the product and the dangers that provides to the environment? You have to constantly be asking how and why and how quickly can you get there to solve for those solutions. And there's plenty of others. And I've been really proud to be part of organizations where we've made a lot of progress in that area. And, I think, a lot of consumers will say, like, hey, I don't care about your brand until your brand tells me what it cares about. If you can't have a message about what it is that your brand cares about, what it is that is meaningful to you, and you're not doing this just for economic reasons, these are real things that you want that are going to help your position in solving climate change or solving how you can make products that are, in some cases, just last longer and won't end up in a landfill. Because we're in an industry that builds 24 billion pairs of shoes a year. And so when you think about how much product is made, you need to do better at creating solutions that keeps product out of landfills and solves those kind of things. And so I'll give an example of someone I think is doing an admirable job with this. And so REI, and you might be aware of this too, recently pulled all of their vendors together, and they challenged every vendor to say, we all need to do better. And there are certain standards that we're going to require now of all of our vendors in order for you to do business with us, because they want to create an environment in their stores where every customer that walks in, every one of their members that walks through those doors knows that they're buying from a brand that is up to the standards that REI has set. And I give them a lot of credit for that, because it makes every brand then take a step back and say, all right, challenge met. What are we going to do to make sure that, we're doing better? And sometimes it's just doing the basics. Other times it's like, how do you elevate the things that you're already doing? And so other retailers will provide you with a scorecard. You will literally get a scorecard as to how you're doing. And it can sometimes be humbling because you know that you can do better. They're telling you can do better. And so I appreciate that. I appreciate, in this case, retailers holding their vendors accountable for the things that they can do better.
Keith, what advice would you give to emerging leaders in the outdoor industry who aspire to make a meaningful impact?
Well, it's a good question. I think one, it's important to build diverse teams. And, we talked about this earlier, but I think it's really important as a leader that you have to look across the organization and feel confident that you are represented in the right way. You have diversity that's been addressed. Equity and inclusivity is part of how you're building teams. And that you're allowing those teams then to be able to come to the table and share ideas in a non-threatening way, right? And so, I've seen that in certain organizations where sometimes employees are afraid to voice their opinions or challenge where maybe a brand can do better. And so I think that's the first step. And I think as you're building those teams, it's important to think about how you're building the future. You're not necessarily looking at their past, you're looking at their future and the potential that they bring to the organization in the long run. And so I think every good leader needs to be thinking of it in those terms as well. And then you got to walk the walk. I mean, it's like you have a culture, you've established a culture, you preach the culture. Now you've got the rest of the organization looking at you as an example to live it and breathe it. And if you don't, it's the first opportunity that a culture can begin to crumble within the organization. Leaders need to not only demonstrate that, but they also need to listen. They need to be visible and accessible. When team members, when other employees, when part of the organization voices a concern, you got to take it seriously and listen and ask yourself, how can I do a better job of exemplifying what this brand represents? Because nothing can destroy culture faster than that. I would say the other thing too is just be vulnerable, be uncomfortable. It's okay to hire people that aren't like yourself. In fact, it's a mistake to hire people that are like you. That's how you build diversity. It's how you find your replacements. And I always look at that in people as like, who is it there that could be my replacement? And don't be threatened by it. Embrace it. So I think, those are the things that come top to mind for me. But the other thing I'll also add is communication and being able to communicate up and down the organization. I've also seen leaders that get so focused on just communicating up that the message is lost, across the rest of the organization. I think it's really important that leaders are able to communicate up and down and across the organization. If you have a 3-year plan and you keep that thing locked up in a drawer, or maybe it's only shared with the executive team, then you can't expect the organization to rally around that and support it. And so, having that ability to share in that vision across the organization, I think is really critical.
That's super sound advice. So just to recap that, be the culture you want to create. Don't talk about the culture you want. Be the culture yourself. I think that's excellent. Hire differently, right? I'm a firm believer that you hire for attitude. There's so much you can do with the right perspective and the right attitude. Yeah. And then be part of the organization. Talk up and down, right? I've heard this mentioned a few times. There's no one who knows more about an organization than the janitor. They're in everyone's offices. They know what trash is in everyone's bins. They know where everyone hides their stuff, right? And those are people that you don't realize that actually, they're part of your team. They're part of your organization.
Sure.
Top to bottom. I love this.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I've got two last questions for you, Keith. Tell us, one book that you have recommended to more people than any other book, and this type of person that you've recommended this book to is someone that you truly care about?
Yeah. So there's a book that I've read a few times, and I recommend this to new leaders, and that it's called Leaders Eat Last. And you've probably heard of it. I think it's been out now for almost 10 years. Simon Sinek is the author. He also has a great TED Talk as well that you should listen to if you haven't had a chance. But his approach to the book, and this is why I recommend it to new leaders, is how do you create a circle of trust within your teams that shows that you care, that you're leading with a service heart, that you're part of the team, not necessarily elevating yourself up. And so, he uses a lot of military examples where, sergeants or generals will stand at the back of the line while the rest of the troops are able to eat first. And I think it's a good example. And how you apply that to leadership is that, you understand that it's not all about you. It is about how you lead and guide and bring teams together in a way that they can trust and feel empowered and can make decisions. And I think a lot of success that's made within teams is just that. I mean, a leader is a part of a team, but they also understand the importance that they have in really leading, guiding, developing, and protecting at times their teams. I think one of the things that they talk about in the book too is that there's opportunities for people to step up. And I've seen opportunities within organizations that I've worked for and the people that work for me to provide them with more visibility, because I have so much confidence in them that they're going to be successful in those situations. And now all of a sudden, with that visibility, they just have that much more recognition for the things that they're capable of doing and where they can go in the organization. So that's one. The other one, completely non-business related, but the Book of Joy is one and that's the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. All right, I've read that book so many times, and it's good to kind of ground yourself every now and then in the fact that we've got 7-8 billion people on this planet. You're part of that, but you're just a small part of that. The influence then that you can have around that group around you is where your focus can be, and then let that start to radiate out. There's a lot of great lessons in that book, and you have to be in the right situation to recommend a book like that. But for any new leader, and I just had a situation where we promoted someone on my team to a senior director role, and Leaders Eat Last was the first book I recommended. And he also came with a military background, so he really dug it. So
that's fantastic. I am a fan of Simon Sinek. So Leaders Eat Last, for those who are listening, I will put this link in the show notes. And you also talked about the TED Talk, which I've watched his TED Talk. His book on why was ultimately how I came up with the idea for Highline Outdoor Group. Let me rephrase it. Not how I came up with it, but what was our mission really based on? What were we really going to do? And it really started with the why. So I love these recommendations. And then the Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, the Book of Joy. I haven't read it, but it's sitting right now on my wife's nightstand, and she just reads little pieces of it. I've asked her about it.
Yeah,
but I know what book you're talking about because I see it every single time I go in and out of our bedroom. So
I have it highlighted, dog-eared. It's just, and there are just moments in time where it's just, you feel like, oh, there's a reference in this book. I need to go back, and it just kind of reinforces or just kind of gets you to a better place. And so there's plenty of uses for that book, in my opinion. But
I am now more intrigued to take a peek.
There you go.
At this book. So, okay.
Read it together. I'm sure you'll have lots of good conversations around it.
She would love that. She would absolutely love that. I am the quintessential nonfiction business book executive search. I read too much nonfiction, but I have recently started reading a fiction series called The Gray Man. And it's a book about a Navy SEAL, kind of a mercenary, which is not for everybody. It's not a light read. It's kind of heavy, but I listen to it. I take a Bluetooth speaker into my sauna that sits right outside my office, and that's how I get through sitting in 185 degrees and 24 minutes at 185 degrees. And I'm like, these Navy SEALs and these men are out there doing, and women are out doing this. I could sit here and sweat it out right now. That's how, it's kind of how I clear my mind after the work day. Okay. I got
yeah. Yeah.
All right. So here is my last question, Keith. What in life right now are you most excited about?
So I am excited about my next journey. And I say that because, you mentioned it earlier. I think, I've been in the industry for decades. In that time, I have never taken a break, right? I've never had a break between, my career and I somewhat do that purposely, right? Like I do get restless and I want to keep myself busy. But I'm in a situation now where I'm taking a pause and I'm trying to understand, like, what is the next thing I want to do? And, I've been able to be exposed to a lot of different companies, a lot of different opportunities, a lot of different functional areas that I've been able to lead and manage. And now I'm at a point of like, okay, what do I want to make my stamp in this industry? And I think, whether that comes through, a leadership role in an organization where I think really, again, it meets my culture and values, but really in a way that I think I can contribute to those in the organization and also to the business. There's also opportunities for me to be on advisory boards and do different things as well. And so those are areas that I think are exciting for me also. And so that's the beauty of where I'm at right now, is that I can chart my path and I'm really excited about it. It's probably maybe one of the most exciting parts of where I've been in my career right now. So I'm thrilled about that.
I think that's super exciting, and I appreciate you sharing that with all of us. Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. Keith, I want to just tell you how much I appreciate you joining me today, and for those who are going to get exposure to this. And I just want to wrap this up, and for everyone who does get a chance to listen to this, that now more than ever, anyone that you encounter today, try to be as kind as humanly possible to them. But even more importantly than that, be even kinder to yourself.